Well, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning. Are you able to hear me and are you able to see me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. One person should be responding if in case I ask something. Who is it who will respond? One person. Is Mr. Bhatt there or? Well, just give me a minute. I will just try to see if the PowerPoint works. Give me half a minute. Let me just see.
Okay. Very good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning.
It's okay. Let me first of all complete my formalities.
Oh no! I will just check that the PowerPoint is able. I will come back to the screen. Give me half a minute.
Okay, sir. Till then, I will be doing my formalities, sir.
Okay, definitely. But let me first see if the PowerPoint is working or not. Right?
Okay, sure, sir.
Okay, just your entire screen. Okay, share. Well, one of you respond. Are you able to see the PowerPoint? No,
Not yet,
just
sir.
that's not yet. So just give me. Why is it not showing? Let me just see. Just give me half a minute. Share. I'm back to the main screen. I can see all of you. I'm trying to do the PowerPoint the way I used to do. So let me see what's wrong with it. Why did it not show?
Okay, sure.
Just
Take
your
your time,
entire
sir.
screen. I'm showing my entire screen.
Okay, sir.
Just give me share. Why doesn't it? Share your entire screen. Share. Yeah, just give me half a minute.
It's running now, sir.
Yeah, just one moment. PowerPoint. Stop sharing. Yes, this is. Yeah, are you able to see it now?
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Okay.
Perfectly.
I'm stop sharing on this and then coming to the main screen.
All the participants, hello. Hello. All the participants are requested to please put your microphones off.
Well, please go ahead. Whatever you have to do. Yes. Yes, Mr. Bhatt.
Okay, sir. Our respected head, Department of Humanities, Social Sciences and Management, and at Srinagar, dear colleagues, members of the organizing committee, dear scholars of the department, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to the day 3 of the 5 days online national workshop on research methodology in literary studies and humanities. I hope the previous sessions of this workshop have proved to be useful learning experiences to you, and I'm sure today's sessions will be quite equally illuminating and enlightening for all of us. I'm very much delighted to introduce to you the resource person of this session, Professor Anil Kumar Rana, a renowned scholar and academician of par excellence. Professor Rana will be delivering his talk on research ethics, documentation in research, citation, bibliography with respect to MLA and APA styles. With an outstanding teaching and research experience of 46 years, Professor Rana is currently a senior professor and formerly chairperson of the Department of English and Culture Studies, Punjab University, Chandigarh. Professor Rana has a wonderful range of academic qualifications. Besides having earned PhD, MPhil, MA in English, he has got MA in Political Science, LLB, PG Diploma in Management, and PG Diploma in Human Resource Development. It is more amazing to know that he has got distinction of joining college at the age of 9 only and graduating at the age of 14. Outstanding, sir. With his specialization in literary criticism, Professor Rana has published scores of books, research articles, and chapters with publishers of global renown. He has been on frequent academic visits to the top universities across the globe, which include Oxford University, University of Copenhagen, Denmark, University of North Carolina, USA, University of London, La Trobe University, Australia, Seoul National University, South Korea, to mention a few. Besides being associated with scores of state and central universities, IITs, NITs, and various other organizations across India, he is a founding member and ex-president of Melis Mellow, ex-vice chairman, Sahitya Akademi, Chandigarh, and the list goes on. I, Nasir Farid Bhatt, convener of the workshop, am humbled to welcome Professor Anil Kumar Rana to the day 3 of this workshop. Due to the tight schedule and his already promised engagements with some other important events, fortunate enough to have Professor Rana with us in the very first session itself, but we are no less fortunate to have got this opportunity to listen to your lecture today, sir. Thank you, sir. I once again welcome you and request you to honor this session with your lecture. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nasir Bhatt, and I am really pleased to be here, invited by you people, and NIT Srinagar, which was earlier, I think, REC Srinagar. It's NIT Srinagar now. I have done my graduate master's from Kashmir University, and so I have been in touch with people with what was REC then, now it's NIT. So I'm really grateful that you have invited me here. Now I'm going to the PowerPoint presentation. Why? Because I think PowerPoint presentation may help people who are watching this register some points. So let me go to the PowerPoint presentation. Just give me half a minute. Enter screen. Here. Okay, now just let me know in case there's a problem. Just call me on, Nasir, you should call me on the phone in case.
Yeah, sure. I will definitely.
So I hope you are able to see the title, Documentation in Literature and Humanities.
Yes, it is visible, sir.
Production. So you are able to see that. So I will go ahead and you are able to hear me. Now, I'm going to the next slide. Just give me. Well, we have roughly an hour and 15 minutes, and some time is already gone. I will try to cover the major points in these 75 minutes, but let's try to see how much we can do. Now, I'm asking all of you to think on these points. Now, when I say think on these points, I know thinking takes a lot of time and you will be thinking on them for hours together. But right now, I will briefly tell what are the points that you need to think on. Research or academic writing as conversation. Because number one, I shall be talking on documentation, but before documentation, this is in general about research, which other people may have also spoken to you about. Research, or what others might call, some might call academic writing, is basically a conversation. Why I'm saying this is, things will get clear as we move on. It's a conversation between you and people who are dead or people who are alive, scholars who have written. It's a conversation. It's not academic writing, and research is a conversation. Then in research, you do review of literature, for which someone else would be talking to you. That's not my topic, but you need to know review of literature is important thing, whether you are doing humanities or social sciences or whatever, everywhere you read about why to do review of literature. I'm not going to discuss this in detail, but review of literature is whatever scholarship is available. Even in literature and humanities, we might not have a separate chapter on review of literature. Most of us do not have, but as part of introduction or somewhere, we also do review of literature. Then note taking, nothing to do with what you call why I have put this here. There's a reason for that. Note taking is part of my suggestion to you to think on this, because when I was doing my PhD long back in 80s, one of our teachers who was also doing his PhD in the department, and he was a lecturer at that time, and for becoming a reader or professor those days, he wanted to do his research, and his thesis came back for revision. And why did it come back for revision? I won't narrate the whole story. It came back for revision because he had not written the page numbers where they were needed. When he was quoting, he did not have the page numbers, or when what we call referencing and other things, he did not have the page numbers. His supervisor had not told him. He told me, my supervisor did not tell me. It's not the job of the supervisor to tell you you have to have page numbers for everything. So when you are taking notes, please note down the page number for the quote. That is what I learned. I mean, I knew that, but that made me convinced me that I need to tell you people also that note taking is also part of research activity that you do. And I move to the next point. What does UGC say on research methodology? There's a September 2020 document. It talks a great deal on research methodology and other things. And it says so many things. I have a separate lecture on that. I won't be discussing that right now here. But when I read that, it's primarily meant for research in sciences and technology. And you are from the NIT, but then you are maybe from the humanities department or the liberal arts department or whatever it is. But UGC is concerned primarily with research in sciences and technology. Though a line, one or two lines are there somewhere where they say, well, in humanities, but otherwise it's all about science and technology. And if you believe that only science and technology we are going to contribute to the world, give more knowledge, well, humanities have their own reasons for doing research, and we contribute to knowledge in our own way. Once again, that's a separate topic and a separate lecture I have for that. I'm not going to discuss that. Research methodology and documentation, I have put it in bold. Why? RM is research methodology and documentation. At one stage, and I have even lectured when I was young, where I confused that documentation, research methodology in English, because I primarily am a professor in English, is primarily documentation. And that's what we thought. We had a paper called the paper was on approaches to literature and research methodology. And we never knew that research methodology was a bigger word and documentation is just one part of it. So that's why many of you might tell you, well, this is all that you need to know. No, research methodology, other people will, when they are talking about the different, in sciences, you have to be objective all the time. In literature, I have a word for that. We have to be subjective, but subjective, not, I say transparent subjectivity. I have another lecture on that. I'm not going to discuss that here with you. And then Mendeley and other applications. This is like, there are applications which help you with this, but they are not easy. I mean, it takes time. I'm not dealing with those applications here. And the last point, Wikipedia and Google search. Now, in today's world, for everything we go to I myself go to the Google search. Whenever I have a query, I go and try to find it on the Google search. Is it acceptable or not? What does MLA say on that? We shall come to that. Wikipedia, all of us go to Wikipedia. Is it acceptable or not? What does MLA say on that? Just try to see. As far as I'm concerned, I also use Wikipedia and Google search. And I would suggest that MLA also allows you, agrees that, well, you may, but just in the beginning, but not as part of your scholarly activity. So this is in general certain things that you can think about. But otherwise, I'm going to the next one. These points you will think about, and let me move to the next one. Documentation in research. Now, what is documentation? We are coming to the topic that is part of my PowerPoint presentation today, or the lecture today, whatever you call it. What is documentation in research? In a research paper or thesis, right now, what's the difference between thesis and dissertation and research paper? I presume that all of you know it. Well, one may be American, one may be English, whatever it is. You try to find out that. But right now, I'm talking about a research paper or thesis. All of these are research activities, and documentation is the evidence provided for information and ideas borrowed from others. Now, I'm focusing on this thing. Documentation means the evidence that you are providing for information and ideas borrowed from others. So, research methodology is a huge topic where you will be talking about different approaches also, and deconstruction and feminism and Marxism and other things. But documentation is the evidence provided for information. Information, you might be even hearing something from someone. Even that is information. Not only the written thing. And ideas borrowed from others. Do we borrow from others? Well, we do. We make use of them. We build on them. That is what, when we do review of literature, we build on them, we modify them and things like that. But we do read a lot. When I was doing my research, I had thought that I would write everything original, but I saw everyone having so many references at the end. And I said, well, these people are not doing their job well. Why are there so many references? Till the time when I joined research, then I realized that research is not only contribution to knowledge. Research is also a test of your scholarship. You can contribute to knowledge only after you know what others have done till that time. That's why you may have to borrow and build on what you borrow. Remember, research is not a test of your originality only. It is a test of originality. That's why we all the time say that you have to be original. But it's a test of your scholarship also. This, I think, many people, take it as a surprise, but I think that research is a test of scholarship and originality. If you understand this point, let me move on to the next one. Proper documentation. Proper documentation. Proper documentation is then the way it is to be done. It has to be done scientifically. It has to be done objectively. There's nothing. I know when I was doing my PhD, there was a student in the education department who had absolutely no idea of what documentation means. He said, well, I will give the names at the end of all these people that I have referred to. And he did it in a completely unalphabetical way and things like that. Now, that's not the way to go about documentation. You have to do it in a proper way. And that's what my lecture or presentation may help you with the proper documentation. It helps you organize your notes and data. Notes and data is whatever you have collected. You may be from thing other than literature. You may be from other social sciences. Or your notes, you may have read something and you have to make your notes. Now, how do you organize your notes and data and put it in the research thesis? For that, you have to give evidence. It also adds validity to your work. All researchers would know that making notes of whatever you read is essential. Along with the page numbers, if you're quoting directly, or even if you are not quoting directly, you should be aware of what I have read from what place. It also adds validity to your work, to your research work, gives credit to others in your field. So giving credit to others who may be working in the same area, who may have already done some work, and makes it easier to share your research with others. This is important again, because after you have done your research, we talk of disseminating research, publishing your research, or contributing to knowledge by making others aware of what you have done. For that, documentation is important. All of you should build the habit of documenting every piece of research you acquire. all of you should build the habit of documenting every piece of research you acquire. And if you think this is my line, this is not my line. I just went to Google search and I said, what is documentation? And documentation, I took a line from there. All of you should build the habit of documenting every piece of research you acquire. Now I have got this idea. All of you should build this habit. Where did I get this idea? I got this idea from Google search. Now, of course, as a critical thinker, I will think on it, is it right or not, or should I be, I think this is right, so I have put it. But the idea is not mine. The idea I have taken from Google search. That's why within brackets I have written Google search. I'm giving evidence of the place where I got it from. So now the next point is each professional field. Professional field means someone is doing, you are doing technology, most of you are doing BTech or whatever it is. Each professional field, maybe it's the lawyer, you are doing LLB or LLM or whatever you are doing research in law, or in humanities, it's also a professional field. Each professional field follows certain conventions. And these we have to learn, not rules or conventions. Conventions is this is the way it's done. And someone tells us this is the systematic way of doing it. Now, I'm not going into logic of why you are doing it. For example, I will tell you something. If I say put it in capital letters, let me say, I'm telling you put it in capital letters. Now, if you are doing work in Hindi or Urdu, there are nothing like capital letters there. But in English, if I say put it in capital letters, I'm following a system of capital and small cases. Unless you know what's the capital and small case, then how would you put it in capital letters? So there are conventions also. You have the word the in English. We don't have the equivalent to that in Hindi or Urdu as far as I know. Now, there are certain conventions that we have to follow while using these things. And we have to learn them. As part of our research activity, this is the first thing you should be learning. And this is what this lecture is going to be about. Academic integrity. I think the topic that you had sent me had research ethics in the beginning. My topic doesn't have the research ethics in the beginning because that's a separate longish area. But it does talk about academic integrity. Why is this documentation important? This documentation is important if you want to avoid the others might say that you have plagiarized, and if you're documenting, you can say that, well, I have mentioned the name where I have taken it from. However, I'm not stealing. I'm just telling you that I have taken this from someone else. For example, the line, a couple of lines before I said Google search. When I said Google search, I'm not stealing. I'm acknowledging that this idea is from Google search. So academic integrity is that what we are looking for when we say of research ethics. Again, that's a separate topic. We are not going to go into that, but academic integrity is part of what you call when we say of documentation also. Let me move to the next slide. And in case anyone has any questions, I will give you 5 minutes in the end to ask me questions. But in case there's something urgent somewhere, you can stop me. If you think, well, you are not able to understand what I'm saying simple things. But if by chance you are not able to understand, you can ask me to stop for a moment. But I'm going to the next slide now. Okay, the title that I was sent was also perhaps had words like references. I don't know whether it were there or not, so I'm mentioning these words. References, citations, and bibliography. All 3 words were not there. I think perhaps there were only 2 words, or maybe all 3 were there. What is the reference? What is the citation? What's the bibliography? Let me be clear about one thing, first of all. We use language to communicate. But when we discuss the philosophy of language, then, because as a student of literature, we always start questioning things. We always, for some other person, it's very clear what's the citation. Well, citation is this and this. Okay, but our literature students or students who are in humanities have this question of going into too many details. I'm not going into too many details because no word has any meaning. That is my philosophy. Meaning is given by us. The word does not have meaning inbuilt into it. Meaning is given by us. And right now, the meaning that I'm giving of these references, citation, and bibliography, you may question that. But for our purpose, this is what they mean. Otherwise, I often lecture on the meaning of meaning and things like that, which are when we am discussing literature. I'm not discussing literature right now. I'm discussing documentation, and we have to be clear about what these words mean. Though in my mind, I am aware that you may perhaps not agree with some of them. Up to you. But what is a reference? A reference, briefly, to acknowledge the contribution of other writers and researchers in your work. So when you acknowledge the contribution of other writers, you mention the name of that person or the title of the book that you want to acknowledge. That is a reference. So reference is usually to a written work, and sometimes, as we'll see, it won't be only to written works now. Now you could be referring to maybe something which is available online, not written form, but CDs and DVDs and whatever it is. And so acknowledge the contribution of other writers and researchers in your work. Now you have movies on, they are not written, but you can maybe refer to them also. Now that's a reference. Now what is a citation? A citation is a formal references, formal. If I had been doing the lecture on academic writing, then you know that well, we write a lot. Personal writings and creative writing and all those things. Now, those are not formal, but academic writing is formal, so we need formal references in academic writing. Formal writing to published or unpublished sources that you consulted and obtained information from while writing your dissertation, thesis, research paper. I'm putting all of them together because when we talk about research, all this is part of your research activity. Formally, how do you have to refer to them? That is a citation. You are citing someone and then you are following a certain procedure for citing them. And what is bibliography? Bibliography is list of all sources you have consulted. List of all sources you have consulted, not necessarily referenced. List of all sources you have consulted, whether referenced or not. You may not have mentioned them in your title, you may not have mentioned it in your thesis, mentioned the name, but you have consulted something. And bibliography is a list of all sources you have consulted, whether referenced or not. And what is work cited? Work cited is a list of the sources that you have referenced and or quoted. If you now have mentioned it in your thesis, made the reference to something or quoted something, then you have to mention it in the works cited list also at the end. Nowadays, why there are so many people who are confused between what is the difference between bibliography and works cited. Should I give bibliography or should I give works cited? Now you will discover that works cited is a must for Mla documentation, as we shall shortly see. Bibliography they do not recommend. But then depending on which subject you are working in, you might go for bibliography, you might go for works cited, but I am saying that works cited is different from bibliography. Bibliography is list of all sources, while works cited is list of the sources that you have referenced and or quoted. And if I am mentioning only works cited, then if I mention something which I have consulted but not referred to or not quoted, then works cited title would not be the correct title. Then you need to, I suggest to my students who are doing research with me, that you might write works cited and consulted. Works consulted or works consulted you might write, or you might write works cited and consulted, or you might write only works cited. Just think about this thing. Works consulted are works consulted during your research but not borrowed from. Now, this is briefly about the title that you want me to talk about. Before that, I want to get the things clear, reference, citation, bibliography, whatever it is. With that, I move to the next slide. Sources and styles. Sources and styles. Now, I do not know whether you are aware of what I want to speak on, but let's look at what I'm speaking on. Primary and secondary sources. I am not sure. I presume that I was told that most of you are in the area of literature, but I'm not really sure that all of you are in the area of literature. Well, there's some maybe from other subjects also. But in literature, we do talk about primary and secondary sources. And sometimes in the UGC, but you might have cleared, some of you might have cleared UGC, some of you might have to appear in the UGC. You might get a question on primary and secondary data. And there are many questions in the UGC on primary and secondary data, objective type questions. Now, primary and secondary sources is different and primary and secondary data is different. Do not treat them as synonyms. Primary and secondary data, usually social sciences people or people who are from subjects which collect data, where you have to collect data from going to the society and collecting data, and sometimes the data is available and things like that. Now, don't confuse primary and secondary sources with primary and secondary data. In the UGC, I have not seen a question being asked on primary and secondary sources, but they do often ask a lot of questions on primary and secondary data. Primary and secondary sources, as far as literature is concerned, I'm addressing only literature people now. Primary sources are the works that you are going to work on. For example, someone wants to write a thesis on Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Then Pride and Prejudice is the only primary source for it. Secondary source would be all the other people who have written on Pride and Prejudice or written on anything that is the part of your topic. Those would be secondary sources. Every researcher should know this. When I say every researcher should know this, I find it strange that sometimes even students who have done their MPhil, not necessarily from Punjab University, but from other places, or who have submitted their thesis for PhD from other universities, do not know the difference between primary and secondary sources. And I make them revise that thesis unless they are able to tell me what is their primary source and what's their secondary source. Now, let me give you a question. Someone is applying Foucault or Lacan or Derrida to, let's say, a novel like David Copperfield. Now, is Derrida your primary source? No, Derrida is your secondary source. You are applying him. You are not working on him. Dickens is your primary source. Derrida is your secondary source. But if you are working in the area of theory and working on Derrida's idea of deconstruction, that is your main focus of research, then Derrida may be the primary source. So these are questions that you should be aware of when you are dealing with documentation and primary and secondary sources. Now, that was briefly sources. Now, next point that I have written here is there are numerous documentation styles. Numerous. Not one, not two, not even 10 and 15. I can identify 10, 15 immediately, but there are more than that. So there are numerous documentation styles. I mentioned just 3 of them here. MLA and APA and Chicago and so many. I work for some other organization. I do some consultancy for them where none of these 3 is applicable. They have it's a medical organization and they take some help from me. Now, my point is this. As far as documentation styles are concerned, there's nothing final about them. But for, I would say, 90% of students who work in literature and humanities, I would say 90%, that's a rough estimate, use the MLA style. And this particular present lecture would be primarily on MLA guidelines, MLA style. Then APA. APA is used primarily by social sciences people, which doesn't mean that they may not use something else. Now, what's social sciences? Which subjects are social sciences? Natural sciences use neither MLA nor APA. They use their own style. Natural sciences means physics and chemistry. So I'm not addressing everyone here. I'm addressing here people who belong either to literature or to humanities or maybe partly to social sciences people also. But not everyone, not the law people, for example. Research, how do they do it? What is the documentation they apply? Though I have done my law, but I have not done my PhD in law. So I won't be using either MLA in there I won't be using APA there. I won't be using Chicago there. Chicago is also used by some literature journals. So you may know that, but 90% of the people would be interested in what is this MLA, which is very simple. MLA is Modern Language Association. But what do they have to say on documentation? Learning that takes time, and you as a researcher do not need everything that is written there. Of course, you should be aware of that, but the major points you have to be aware of. Having said that, I will move to the next point. Okay, next point is the same that I was talking about. MLA is usually used by researchers in humanities, oblique English studies. Now I'm saying English studies. I'm not going to go into a discussion on this. We don't have that much time. But APA by psychology and social sciences researchers. And as far as MLA is concerned, MLA, the latest edition that is now available is 9th edition of MLA in 2021. But currently most of us means even I or my students, they have not gone to the 2021 edition. They use the 8th edition of 2016. So primarily whatever I'm telling you in this would be based on the 8th edition of 2016, and MLA 2021 9th edition is almost similar, except for the minor changes that they have added in regarding to this movies and other things like that. And as far as the APA is concerned, the 7th edition in 2020 is the one that is now available. But in all probability, I will give you some hints on this, but I'm aware briefly of APA, but the earlier edition, the 5th edition and others. So I shall be briefly talking about that in this. Let me see whether I'm going slow or whether I'm going fast, because it's 11:21 and I have to continue till 10 till 12, I think. Okay, now let me go to the next one. Because there are MLA style, quickly, I'm not going into this, I'm just reading it. A long history of MLA, suggestions on scholarly writing, that was MLA style sheet in 1951. Later changed into handbook for writers of research papers, theses and dissertations, and the editions 77, 84, 88, 95, 99, 2003, 2009, 2016, the 8th edition we are talking about, and 2021. MLA style manual for academic scholars. The first one is for research papers, theses and dissertations. Style manual is for academic scholars like professors and others. And that has 3 editions, 85, 98, 2008. You don't need to bother about the years and dates. But all that I want to tell you is, even when I started research in Kashmir, I was planning to, of course, then I came to Punjab University to complete my research. But I was told, go and read MLA style manual or MLA style sheet, whatever they told me. And I was wondering, what is this MLA and things like that? And maybe some of you, of course, you are more knowledgeable these days, may know that, well, MLA is what we need. But what MLA style sheet, MLA style manual, or MLA handbook, all this is confusing. You don't have to be confused, because we are referring only to 2016 edition, and that is more or less final. What does the next point say? In April 2016, MLA announced that its handbook would henceforth be the authoritative source of MLA style. Its handbook means this 2016 one that we are referring to, would be the authoritative source for MLA style, whether it's the researcher or whether it's the academic scholar. MLA style goes by now the 2016 handbook. And that the 2008 third edition of MLA style manual will be the final edition of the larger worker. After that, no edition would come. So, without going into, because this is, if we are going to into this history of MLA and things like that, but we are going to deal with MLA, what it tells researchers like you who are doing their PhD or MPhil or writing a paper for a journal. If you have to follow MLA style, 2016 we are going to follow. 2021, someone might say, why not 2021? Straight away, 2016 covers almost everything that is in 2021. I have the 2021 with me here also, but right now we are doing 2008 edition. Having said that, let me move to the next one. Language and documentation. Of course, I should have done it in, Now think on read. Don't read all the three. Read them point by point. First, bullet by bullet. First, second, and third. Don't read them together. Think on this. Many people have written on the Greek hero Ulysses. Very good. And I have read Ulysses. Someone is saying this. But unfortunately, I could not read Ulysses. Now, when I read this sentence, I get confused. The person who is reading this, has he read Ulysses? The MLA uses bold letters and letters in italics and letters which are underlined, words which are underlined, and inverted commas and capitalization. And there can be no casual or whimsical use of these things. I would say half my students do this casual or whimsical use. Okay, even you would be doing if you are doing your research. Oh, yeah, let me put this word in bold. No, let me underline this because I like it. No, that is casual or whimsical use. You have to follow something that the MLA handbook recommends. So you should be aware of the documentation method that you are using. Documentation method that you are using in the next few slides, I'm talking about MLA. Last couple of slides, I might talk about APA, but otherwise, this is all about MLA. I hope I have the time to complete this presentation. So MLA, of course, would take me at least 1 week to deal with it in detail. But the main points that you at your level need to know would be covered in this presentation. Now, let me read this sentence. I have written the third one. You might have already read it because it's tempting. Many people have written on the Greek hero Ulysses. It's the same that is written there. And I have read Ulysses, but here now Ulysses is with inverted commas. But unfortunately, I could not read Ulysses. Now, Ulysses is written on the top also, and Ulysses is written here also, but now Ulysses is in what I say, italics. So, this last sentence uses Ulysses sometimes without anything, sometimes with inverted commas, and sometimes with italics. Now I understand the person has read. I mean, I told you to guess it, and you would be guessing it, but because we are not right now interacting. Ulysses is the name of the poem by Lord Tennyson, the first Ulysses, which is in inverted commas, which most of you might have read at some stage, just a couple of pages poem, Ulysses. That he has read, but he has not read Ulysses. Which Ulysses? The novel by James Joyce, because this is in now italics. Now I know this is the novel, this is not the poem. Because as a student of literature, I know James Joyce has written Ulysses in the early 20th century. She has not read that. She has read the poem Ulysses by Tennyson. Now the top line is very clear as far as your research work is concerned. But if you do not, if in your research you write like this, then this is all contradiction. Why I'm giving this is, now you need to know about when to use what, when to use inverted commas. I know almost 90% of students at the MA level do not know how to use inverted commas and where to use italics and things like that. 90%. But by the time they come into MPhil or PhD, we make it a point that they need to learn these things. And I hope that you also learn these things. Having said that, let me move quickly to the next one. MLA 8th edition. What does it teach you? MLA 8th edition teaches you a widely applicable skill. Now, as students who are dealing with higher education, we are often made to think and discuss and debate. But as far as skills are concerned, skills are to be learned. If you have to build a window or a door, you need the carpenter skills, and then only you can do that. Same way, if you want to be a barber, you have the barber skills, then you can become a barber. Otherwise, you will not know what you are going to make of someone's hair when you are trimming it. So it teaches you a widely applicable skill. This is what MLA documentation 8th edition teaches you. Or even if you take earlier editions, but there will be some changes. So 8th edition is the one that you should be looking at. 9th edition, I say there are no major changes. Now, how to document sources? This is a skill. Just as you say, I am very good at communication skills, or I am very good at writing skills of reading and writing and listening and speaking. Those are language skills. Communication skills, communication. I'm not into that. I'm talking of the skill of documentation. And that is what MLA teach you. But teach you only if you want, if you are in the area of literature and humanities. If you are in the area of natural sciences and you use MLA 8, well, you have not learned anything. It's using a skill wrong. So literature and humanities people, when I say literature and humanities, I have in mind people who are in philosophy or in some other languages like Hindi and Sanskrit. Many of the things they might be using from MLA, but primarily English literature people will use MLA. So please keep this in mind. Now, both in-text citations and works cited list. MLA, I'm talking of MLA only now, not all documentation styles and sources. That would take, you see, sometimes you have a workshop on 1 month. Okay, then you might look at other things. But right in one day, we can look at only in-text citations that MLA talks about and works cited lists that MLA talks about. And the book is available in the market, or you can do it photocopy-wise or whatever. In-text citations, another name for that is, I used to earlier call it parenthetical documentation. When you put the citation within the text itself, within the text, inside the text. Earlier on, in my time, there was nothing like in-text citation or parenthetical documentation when I did my PhD. So we had to write long notes at the end, which were primarily reference notes at the end. And notes or footnotes we will talk about. But now we do in-text citations, and MLA talks about that now. And works cited list, if you look at my thesis, I have neither in-text citation, nor do I have a works cited list at the end. I have a bibliography at the end. But now I ask all my students, and I ask you also, to know these words: in-text citations and works cited list. And then it will also talk to you about the core elements that should be included in each entry in the works cited list. It talks about the core elements. There's one slide on that also. And what is this MLA 813 saying? Helpful guidelines with many examples that one may use on one's own. So you can, if you have the book in front of you, you can use it on your own. There are many examples that are given. No need to consult the book every time if one includes the core elements in the proper order using consistent punctuation. Now, this is important. If you are making a works cited list at the end, you don't need to consult the book every time. If you know what the core elements are and you use them in the proper order with consistent punctuation, which is only comma and stops. 813 talks about comma and stops only in the works cited list. Having said that, let me continue a bit quickly because I would like to finish all these slides. Yes. Now, this is a question which my students often ask me because I do that research methodology course, the coursework I used to do with them. And then they would ask me, is this MLA handbook, the 813, is it a textbook or is it a reference book? And my answer to them and my answer to you, in case you have this thing, I anticipate that you might also be thinking, how do I read this? This is a 813 is a comparatively smaller book. It's only 100 odd pages. So you can even read it, but is it to be read each and every word? For that, my answer is, it teaches you documentation skills, perfectly okay. But among other things, there are pages on plagiarism, which is now not a skill. Plagiarism is not a skill. How to avoid plagiarism may be a skill, but plagiarism, what it is and how to avoid it. Read pages. If you have to read books like a textbook, then read pages on plagiarism, which are pages 6 to 10. Evaluating your sources, pages 10 to 12, and titles of sources, pages 67 to 68. Now, these three things you may read as if you are reading a textbook. This is just a suggestion. Read other pages of the book too, but you may, I have put may in bold, often consult it as a reference book. For example, if you have a difficult word, then everyone says, go and check it, look it up in the dictionary, check it in the dictionary. Dictionary is a reference book. Or nowadays, we don't say go to dictionary, we say go to the Google search and find the pronunciation. That's a different thing. But these are reference books. And you may use the MLA handbook as a reference book also. Consult it as a reference book, that's up to you. But certain pages you would need, for example, evaluating your sources. Which sources do you use and which sources do not? There are pages, 3 or 4 pages in the MLA handbook. Read them as a textbook. And there also he will talk about, roughly around that, he talks about should we be using Wikipedia and Google search, and he says, well, you can use it, no problem. MLA says it, MLA 813 says it. So keep on using Wikipedia, but do not think that that is your scholarship. You read it for if something new comes, you may have a look at it, but nothing more than that. Having said that, let me move on to the next one. Remember, now broadly, APA will say something different when you go to APA, not on everything, but MLA is very clear on these things. It talks not only about in-text citation and work cited list, also talks about how you finally present the thesis. Now it says insert page numbers on all pages except the title one, which I know title page where you don't put any title page is the cover one and the page that follows that. Cover पर तो वैसे ही page number नहीं आएगा. But as far as the title one is usually the page next after the cover page, after the cover. That is also called the cover page. That is, you don't have to put numbers on that, page number on that. But page number you start once the text starts. Leave 1-inch margins. 1-inch margin. Now you might say, do we need to be told this? Well, I myself am aware that one of our teachers would, when a thesis would come to him, he would check the margin. Has he left the 1-inch margin at the top and bottom and on both sides of the text? On both sides of the text, because left side, of course, it gets with the binding, one is not able to measure it. But left, right, top, bottom, 1-inch margin on all sides. And you might say, well, is it very essential? Yes, it's very essential. I got a thesis, of course, I did not ask him to revise it now, but I made this comment in my things that the person not left the margins. He was expecting me to read the thesis, and it was looking very odd. And it was from your state, not necessarily from Kashmir, not necessarily from Jammu, but it was from your state, the J&K state. And of course, the thesis was okay, but it had no margins. So don't make those mistakes. I know when I am saying these things, I think I'm saying things which everyone should be knowing, but people do not know, even at your level. And then avoid inconsistency in your spellings. Inconsistency. Because there are many times, when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old or something like that, at that time, I had found that, well, the word civilization, you could write it with S as well as with Z. And I had also heard people saying that in PhD, you have to contribute something original. So at the age of 5 or 6, I had this something going in a child's mind. Okay, let me keep it to myself that civilization can be written with S as well as Z. And I will tell this to people when I do my PhD. Of course, that was just a funny thing that I was thinking at that time. But we have to avoid inconsistency in our spellings, because I discovered very immediately that both spellings were correct. Well, S is also correct and Z is also correct, and S is one is American and one is British, or even in British you might have more than 2, even in American you might have more than 2. But you have to avoid inconsistency. Both spellings may be correct, whether it is CENTER or whether it is CENTRE. But in your thesis, you can't write on one page CENTRE, on the other page CENTR. So you have to avoid inconsistency in your spellings. That's why I put it. Preferably use British variants. I say preferably because that depends a lot on what your supervisor or whoever you are working with, or the journal that you are publishing in might want you to do. But preferably go for the British variant. And use Times New Roman. Now, as far as font is concerned, this is MLA saying, use Times New Roman. And what's the size of the font? Font 12 when you're writing your thesis. There are people who say that, well, they have written 400-page thesis and the font they have is font 16 or font maybe 14 or something like that. Well, that is unethical. If you are following MLA, you have to write in font 12 and times 2 Roman, not any other font that you're using. APA is more flexible with fonts, but MLA is very clear about it. And then after you have decided to go for MLA, follow it unless a particular department says, or a particular supervisor who is in the department says, no, we will be doing this. Otherwise, if you're following MLA, follow this. For a hard copy of the dissertation, use good quality white A4 size paper, 8.5 inch into 11 inch. That I think everyone knows. Let me move on to the next one quickly. What are the core elements? In the earlier couple of slides back, I said the works cited list has some core elements. And MLA says in your works cited list, the elements should be listed in the following order. Now, why 8th edition is important? Because 8th edition focuses a lot on not only on books and articles, which every MLA edition was dealing with, but focuses a lot on what you call other things like DVD or internet and movies and whatever it is. So it says the elements should be listed in the following. Author as the first name. Now, who is the author of a movie? Well, you have to start thinking about these things, and the MLA gives you guidelines on that. How do you deal with a movie, for example? How do you deal with something which you hear on your podcast or whatever we call it? How do you deal with that? But author is the first element, title of source is the other element, and container is where you have found them. This is the third element. If you are able to identify whatever source you are using and try to say, well, this is the author, this is the title, and this is the container where I read it, then your core elements are okay. And MLA 8th edition says rules have to be followed, but rules alone will not dictate. There would be certain things where there is no clear-cut rule. Then how do you go about it? You go about it trying to identify, okay, is the director its author? If the MLA doesn't say, is the writer its author, the scriptwriter its author of a movie? I'm saying you have to think about those things and then choose. But otherwise, let me move quickly to the next one. Container. Container is the thing where you have read it from. Now, title of container, other contributors, is it edited, version, number, publisher, publication date, location, all these are part of the container. Now, all these explaining them would take time, and then of course container 2 if needed. All this is important in the sense when you're dealing with entries, practically the skills. For that, have a look at the MLA book. And no need to mention the place of publication. Earlier on, we were always told to say, okay, Penguin, which place was the book published in? Or Oxford, okay, you might say London, Oxford, or New Delhi, Oxford. Nowadays, they say no need to mention the place of publication. 8th edition. Only periods and commas needed. Earlier, parentheses and colons were used in journal editions and after issue numbers. When you were quoting from a journal, then other marks were also used, but nowadays we use only stop and comma. With that, let me move quickly to the next one. Some terms, just give me just like 11:40. Okay. I'll be finishing at 12, so I might go slightly quicker, but I will try to finish as many as one can. Now, some terms, and when I'm writing these, sometimes if I'm able to see this presentation, then in a way I have indicated ellipses and 3 dots I have put, and 3 ellipses word, you should know ellipses, you are quoting from someone, but you are not taking the full quote, then you put 3 dots and 4 dots, and to show that. For this, you would need another lecture sometime, or you would need to read that MLA handbook on your own and you will understand it. Square brackets, when you are adding, in ellipses is when you are deleting something from the code. Square brackets are used when you are adding something of your own. So I have put square brackets within square brackets. square brackets to show you what square brackets are. Then the third thing is indent. Now, all these things are skills that you have learned. Indent is 5 spaces from the left slash. I mean, if you look at this, you can see indent is 5 spaces later, not in direct line with ellipses and spacing and other things like that. So it is indented. It's already indented there. Indent. And it's very important when you are quoting particularly long lines and things like that. Spacing in punctuation versus punctuation. How, I mean, you might think that how much space do I give after when I have to put a full stop or put a comma or whatever. Now you need to know that, well, I tried to look at it many times. Do I write full stop after ed and how much space is to be given or not given? Look at it. Usually the punctuation mark is put immediately without any spacing, and after that, 1 space is usually given. There were many people who would say, give 2 spaces one after your full stop. In those days, in earlier times. But then I checked that, well, certain people might be doing 2 spaces, but usually 1 space after you have put the punctuation mark, no space before the punctuation mark. Now, I'm telling these things quickly because we have to go slightly quicker. But the next one is important because this is a mistake. Apostrophe. I hope you are able to see apostrophe. It's versus it is. Yeats versus Yeats's. If you understand this, but I will tell you the problem with ITS versus IT apostrophe S is a mistake that is I have seen in newspapers. I have seen in articles by leading professors I'm saying, not of English department, but professors of social sciences or sciences. No one knows that ITS is a pronoun and is to be treated as a pronoun, and IT apostrophe S is actually 2 words. It is, but they think they confuse between the two. And I think 90% of you also might be confusing. My students I'm talking about make these mistakes, and I tell them I don't want to see this mistake again. Learn it once for all that there's a difference between its and its. But then Yeats, then should we put Yeats after that S? There are 2. Well, MLA says, well, you have to put after S even in Yeats's. Otherwise, we say when there's a plural, we usually do not put an S after that. We just put the apostrophe. Content and reference notes. Well, this is something you might be not knowing and try to. In the earlier editions, earlier times when I wrote my thesis, I'm going back to 1980s and then trying to see. I did not know what content notes and what reference notes were, for the simple reason all notes were put at the end, what we would call end note, or put at the bottom, what we would call footnote. And footnote and end notes were identical. If you were putting it at the bottom, they were footnotes. If you were putting it at the end, they were end notes. Of course, should we put it at the end of the chapter or end of the thesis and things like that? Those questions were there. But content notes are notes which are allowed even now. And content notes means you want to add something to your material, but you don't want to say it within the text. You are making it separate from the text, so you are putting it as a content note, either at the bottom or at the end. While reference notes are which book I have got it from. That is now to be avoided because that is now part of the in-text citation. And having said that, because I'm going quickly, if you have problems with these, go and check these on the Google search, go and check these on the MLA handbook. You will find all these things there, and then you will understand the difference. And then words like abbreviations, like we used to use them a lot. IBID and LOXIT and OPSIT, rest in peace. Now I have written rest in peace. Are these the spellings of peace? No, the spellings of peace are different. But because I have written it rest in peace, then within brackets I have put SIC. Sick means the way I read it. I mean, I'm just telling what it should do. Sometimes we use the abbreviation SIC sick, which means, well, this is the way the person has written it, but I'm quoting him So it's perfectly okay. So if I have written PIEC, it may be wrong, but in the quotation I have to put it as it is and then write SIC after that. And the endnotes, footnotes I talked about. So let me move quickly to the next one. Capitalization in titles. Now this is important because this is right when you submit your title. Let's say you need to know that the first letter of each word has to be in capital letters, except, let me read it quickly what I have written here. Capitalize the first letter in the first and the last word. First word and the last word of the title. Normally, for example, I would say prepositions are not to be capitalized. So preposition is the last word of your title. You have to capitalize that also. Capitalize the first letter in the first and the last word, and all principal words. Like now, many times I ask question to people who come to me for in the selection interviews. Do you know your parts of speech? And they would say, perhaps they would know or not know, but they would say this is a very school boyish type question. But well, you need to know that there are parts of speech in English language. And you should know that a noun, the first letter is to be capitalized. Pronoun, the first letter is to be capitalized. Adjective, the first letter is to be capitalized. Verb, the first letter is to be capitalized. Adverb, the first letter is to be capitalized. And subordinating conjunctions are to be capitalized. Now you might say subordinating conjunctions. Conjunction, though you might be knowing, but you need to know the difference between subordinating and coordinating conjunctions. What's this next line on this presentation? Don't capitalize articles, articles a, and the, prepositions of, on, in, etc., and coordinating conjunctions. Coordinating conjunctions are words like and, or, etc. These are infinitive, means to, go to in that is an infinitive. Now these are not to be capitalized. Most of them should be clear to you, except sometimes you might make a mistake between subordinating and coordinating conjunction. Otherwise, all the first letter of nouns and pronouns and adjectives and verbs and adverbs and subordinate conjunctions is to be capitalized. This is what MLA says. APA does not say it. APA, the fifth edition, does not say it. Seventh edition might have made some change. That's a different thing. Use a colon and a space between the title and the subtitle. I hope you understand that. Between the title, what's the main title, and then you also have a subtitle. Put a colon between the two. Let me move to the next one quickly. Exercise for you. Okay, quickly. Have a quick look. I'm not going to ask you to do it right now, but you can note it down or whatever it is, and then tell me which one is correct and which one is not correct. MLA handbook. Which one would be correct as per the MLA handbook? The teaching of Spanish in English-speaking countries. Now, see for your said, which one is capitalized, which one is not capitalized, would it be correct or would it be not correct? Between 1 and 2, which one would be correct? Life as I find it, life as I find it, which one would be correct? Just check it. Otherwise, go to the MLA handbook later on because we don't have time to discuss them in detail. The artist as critic, is that correct, or the artist as critic? Then there are some entries in text citation. Marcus S. 1975, a survey of musical instruments. Marcus Sibyl, a survey of musical instruments, and so on. Now, which ones are correct and which ones are not correct? You will see that one of them perhaps is the APA one. Which one is APA one? Fine for yourself. But as per MLA, something will be accepted, something will not be accepted. For example, number 7. The year of publication is written here. This straight away tells me this cannot be MLA. This has to be APA. APA may you have to do along. No, of course you will do it yourself. Let me go to the next one quickly. In text citations, quickly, I'm now only reading. Your goal is to attribute your source and provide your reader with a reference without interrupting your text. That's why we do in text citation. Within the text, your reader should be able to follow the flow of your argument without becoming distracted by extra information. So minimum information inside the text. Earlier on, we would give all the details in the works noted and notes. Sorry, and notes and footnotes. And now if you say, let's say you say Marcus 197, enough as far as MLA handbook is concerned. It means that the Marcus's book, now which Marcus's book, for that you have to go to works cited and there you will find it. And not here the publication, here a publication is mentioned by APA. Quickly, let me move on. Okay, when creating in-text citation for media that has a runtime, such as a movie or podcast, include the range of hours, minutes, and seconds you plan to reference, like this. So you can note it and move on. Let me move to the next one quickly. APA, okay, quickly APA. Once again, I'm telling you very clearly, I am mentioning APA as I know it because we do not use it in literature. But when I did my PhD, I had to deal with students who were using APA even in literature, and then I had to tell them, well, in literature we have to avoid MLA. Quickly, I'm reading it. Publication data emphasized because in sciences, timeliness of research is crucial. Why do they put the date, is the year of publication immediately after the author? Why? Because timeliness of research is crucial. In literature, of course, we put it at the end. Timeliness does not matter. Shakespeare wrote in 16th century or 17th century and not in the 21st century. Does not make Shakespeare an inferior writer. So timeliness does not matter to us. It matters a lot in social sciences. What they said 6 months back may now be of no use now. Changes might have happened. Abbreviations P means for page is used before the page number. For example, Marcus 97. Now this is an entry from the APA. Marcus 97, 1975, year of publication. Then page number, page 197. MLA would say straight away, say Marcus, nothing in between, then 197. So there's this difference in MLA and APA. In works cited list, the date in parentheses immediately follows the author's name, whose first name is written only as an initial. This might be Herbert Marcus or this may be some other Marcus. You write H. Marcus when you are giving in the works cited list. You don't write the full name. In MLA, you write what is available on the net. T.S. Eliot. You don't write Thomas Stearns Eliot in the works cited list. In APA, you write T.S. Eliot. Just the first word of the title is capitalized. I already told you. So just a minute. Just one moment. The publisher's full name is given in works cited list, for example, and Marcus, a survey of musical instruments, New York, Harper and Row. This is, for example, how they give it in the works cited list. You can see the difference between the MLA. MLA would have capitalized S, not this should be like this. This should be not bold, this should be in italics. I'm sorry. This one should be in italics, not bold. This is a mistake. This one should be in italics, a survey of musical instruments. This is primarily for capitalization. Capitalization may only the first letter is capitalized and no other capitalization. First line of the entry is indented and subsequent lines are flush with the left margin. So you have a look at it quickly, but except for this line, put it in italics now. Quickly, what's the next line? Well, this is once again on the 7th edition, but I'm going to stop now. Let me see. I'm not reading it. Let me quickly. For MLA documentation, if you need more details in simpler form rather than reading MLA handbook, then you can go to this Purdue Writing Lab. I've written here also for MLA formatting and style guide. This is the best way to get to know the MLA handbook. If MLA and APA both are available on that. And these are the other things that you can look at for in case you have more questions. With that, I thank you and I will stop sharing. And yes, if you have any questions, you can ask me. Just give me. Yes, I'm back on the main screen now. So any question, you can ask me quickly, whatever time is left.
The participants may also write their question in the chat box, if any. Anyway, let me conclude it, sir. Keeping in view the limitations in terms of time, I must
Yes.
use Andrew Marvel's words in my own way to say, had we but world enough or time, we could never end this session. But now we must bring it to close with cordial thanks to Professor Rana and the participants. Thank you so much, sir. This was a wonderful session. Uh, we must call this session to end now, and I think we must straight away begin with the next session. We have another professor who is already waiting for us. He's
Okay.
in line, and
Okay.
I really am so much thankful of you, sir, that you have, given us part of your precious time. I know how busy you have been of late, and this has been a very. I understand this. This has been a very hectic thing for you to hang between so many organizations and give time to us, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you once again.
Thanks a lot, Nasir, and thanks to all the participants here. I hope you will, you may have understood whatever I have said, and you have to work on it now. This is a skill that you have to learn, cultivate it now. With that, I thank all of you and your NIT Srinagar also for
Thank
inviting
you,
me
sir.
today. And yes, someone saying something. Okay, so I'm leaving now. With that,
Okay, sir.
bye to all of you. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Okay, sir. Dear colleagues and participants, welcome to the session 2 of the day 3 of the workshop. Dear all, we shall now begin with right away with the second session of the day, since we could not have time to take a break of 5 or 10 minutes. Anyway, it was a very informative session with Professor Rana. And in this present session and session 2, we have our esteemed resource person, Dr. Muhammad Amin Pare. Welcome, sir. Dr. Muhammad Amin will be sharing with us his ideas and thoughts on digital skills in literary research. Something wrong with my throat. Let me have this opportunity to introduce Dr. Amin. He's a senior assistant professor at the Department of English, North Campus of University of Kashmir. He's an alumnus of Aligarh Muslim University, from where he earned his BA and MA degrees. He earned his PhD from Kashmir University. Apart from his research publications in the form of articles, books, and chapters, he has also been involved in translating Sufi books and reviewing films. He's also the editor of Contemporary Literary Review. It's an online journal. His areas of interest include ELT, linguistics, post-colonial literature, theology, philosophy, comparative literature, and media. Let us welcome Dr. Amin to the session and hope that we shall benefit from his talk. A warm welcome, sir. You may kindly begin your lecture now. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Nasir. Thank you very much. And a very good afternoon to all the participants from different parts of the country. Well, to begin with, am I audible, Dr. Nasir?
Yes, you are pretty much audible, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. It has been, a wonderful experience for the last 2 days to see different professors, academicians, and experts on research methodology from different parts of the country talking about different aspects of research. I guess all the participants in this workshop are from research scholars at different universities, right? And the topic that I have been given to speak about is how different digital skills we require for conducting research in different areas, particularly in humanities and social sciences. Well, it means since I'm a layman like all of you from humanities disciplines, as far as different digital skills are concerned. But then I thought of talking about it because all of us, are in the same discipline, and we are not so much competent in as far as the use of technology is concerned. like the researchers are teachers from the discipline of computer science, information technology, and all other disciplines are. But nevertheless, that does not mean that I mean we can shy away from this very area, because since Y2K, our world has been is being driven by technology, and digital literacy has become very, very important for all of us. I mean, before this, we were in a traditional mode of teaching, learning, research, etc., etc. We would most of the times rely on, we would rely on these printed materials in the form of books, magazines, journals, etc., etc. But now everything has gone digital. So that means digital resources have become very important for us. And learning digital skills for research, for teaching, for learning, etc., is going to be a part of our life. We are not going to say no to it. We have
Sir,
to live it.
excuse me, sir. We have Dr. Suman Bala. She has some from you, I
Okay.
guess. Dr. Suman Bala, you have raised your hand. I think
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is
she can,
an
she
output
can.
for you.
Does she want to
You
ask
may
anything?
you may put your microphone on and ask whatever you want to ask. Dr. Bala.
My, yes, Miss Suman Bala, do you want to ask anything?
I guess she has lost the connection. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you, sir. You may
Okay.
continue.
Now you see, once we are into the research, once we are into the research and we select a topic for ourselves. The first thing that looks at our face is data and data collection. I mean, the nature of data before this age of digitization was in the form of printed materials, right? Magazines, journals, books, etc., etc. Now, its nature has changed. Its nature has changed. Everything has gone digital. So, but in research, we need data, and we have to deal with data. And our age is the age of big data. Our age is the age of big data. And then we also have actually evolved to a discipline in humanities and social science, in humanities particularly, that we refer to as, that we know as digital humanities. Digital humanities, that means we have actually allowed humanities to marry with this age of technology and the way it is actually evolving and shaping, right? So this data is very important for us as research scholars. So in the absence of data, we cannot move. We cannot move on in our research for truth regarding a subject, whatever our subject is. For example, as the scholars of English, or as researchers in English, somebody might be working on post-colonial studies, somebody might be working on, on Shakespeare, somebody on Jane Austen, somebody on somebody else. Now, this age of digital technology, right, offers us archival of all the literature, all the possible literature, whatever is available in the world, in different parts of the world. They have archived the available primary and secondary sources. And this is what becomes the data for a researcher as far as digital world is concerned. Earlier, it was in the form of printed material. So earlier, we would have this data from print texts, live observations, recorded interviews, etc. But with the arrival of digital technologies, data is most of the times available on Google, social media, websites, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and all such stuff that we are familiar with. And everybody is actually doing it. Everybody is actually doing it, right? So there are online journals, there are digital libraries, there are blogging websites that provide a researcher data on different subjects and questions in the world. Now, when I say questions, every research actually begins with questions. I mean, no research can actually take place in this world without some good research questions. You just imagine when Galileo and Newton and Einstein, had they not asked some wonderful and big questions about something, the way this universe is working, I mean, no breakthroughs would have actually taken place. So research questions are very important. So the nature of research questions has not changed with the arrival of this digital technology. It used to be the same in the earlier times, and it is the same in our times when technology is actually controlling everything in our life. Right. So the earlier a researcher needed to visit libraries across the world in search of data. Now internet brings an ocean of data for researchers. So you got an ocean of data, right? Earlier you needed to travel, for collecting information, for collecting primary sources, for collecting different other materials that could have been written by other people, in different parts of the world. Now you don't need to travel. You are sitting in your home, at your home, you are in your office, and a mere click on your laptop, on your phone, iPhone, on your PC, right, brings an ocean of data. And it has got its own problems. It has got its own issues and challenges, right, that we could be talking about in the forthcoming minutes, right? So once a researcher is into this ocean, right, ocean of data, she has to select and grade the data so that he or she may pick up the right kind of materials for his or topic and research questions, because digital technologies store primary, secondary, as well as substandard materials. Therefore, accessing digital media demands that you are willing to access the materials that are really going to benefit you. We could be talking about, because data overload, information overload is also a fact about the digital technologies these days, right? Earlier, you did not suffer from this data overload. I mean, you were the master of everything. Wherever you would go, you would pick up a book, a select magazine or a journal. I mean, the relevant information that you need for a topic. So you are being selective. But a mere click, once you are on the keyboard and you start giving different keywords to Google or to any other search engine, right? An overload of information starts, looking at your face or, challenging you. And then it has got its own, techniques to work with, right? So your mental engagement, your intellectual engagement with that data that's coming to you from different corners of the world, right? With a mere click, right? How to select that data and how to grade that data is equally important for a researcher, particularly if we are from humanities discipline, right? So, and we are not familiar with different other tools that are available, which can help us in the selection and gradation. Of course, there are many tools these days. Scientists have invented that. But generally, we scholars, our teachers and learners from humanities discipline are not familiar with all those things, or we do not take care of those things, and with the result, this overload of information or overload of data is not being properly taken care of. So I believe that we researchers in humanities disciplines, right, need to educate ourselves. We need to actually enter into an interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary kind of approach in our research, where we are talking, dialoguing and having conversation with IT people, with the people who have a good command on the use of this computer science and the different digital technologies. So we should not shy away from all these things. If it involves some training, we need to have that training. If it involves, if it demands the development of some skills, we need to go for that. So nevertheless, what I mean to say is that since Y2K in our part of the world, right, because in Europe and in the West, they have been far advanced, long before this. uh, they've been thinking about such things since 1950s, 1940s, right? But we, as usual, were very late into this field. But now it is there, and we have to accept it. We have to familiarize ourselves with it, and then we have to upgrade our skills as well as the way we can actually go about it and accordingly shape our research. Right. So this is first thing that I just wanted to share with you, that data has changed its form. Earlier, it used to be all in the material form, right? But nowadays, it's available to us in the digital form, right? And there are different search engines like Google, right, and other blogging websites, social media, etc., that offer us a lot of data, and every second of our life, we are receiving data through WhatsApp, through Facebook, through Instagram, through different other social media websites. And apart from that, whatever we want to access, we can access it. And that is why it's the age of big data. And data is the new economy of the world. By the way, I would say that this is the new economy. We are purchasing data, we are selling data, and we are offering data free of cost to the people. For example, somebody uploads a photograph on Facebook. He is offering some data. I mean, an image or a video or anything else or a written word. It becomes a data for somebody else sitting in Europe, or somebody posts some update. It becomes data for somebody sitting in Europe, sitting in Saudi Arabia, or sitting in any other part of the world. So this is the age of big data. And right, and humanities, like other disciplines, is being equally affected, is being equally has been equally responding to this age of big data and digital technologies. So any researcher, for example, we in humanities, when we join research, no matter what the area is, post-colonial studies, post-modernism, or anything, or psychoanalysis, primarily we must remember that we are going to deal with data. We are going to deal with, in the disciplines of science, they collect the data. For example, a botanist would go to a garden and then put something under his observation, and then he would go on analyzing its development, whatever he is dealing with, right? So similarly, in humanities, when it comes to data, our data comes from books, our data comes from journals, comes from magazines, anything that's written over there. It is data for us. We have to collect this data. We have to organize this data. We have to evaluate and analyze this data. We have to read this data. And then the next stage, which Professor Anil Rana talked about, we have to communicate whatever we observed or analyzed about this data. So that's a research process, and everybody knows, all the researchers know how we deal with that. And when it comes to communication, this communication is again not a one-sided traffic, it's a two-sided traffic, right? Earlier, we used to write letters to people, living elsewhere, and we through those letters, if we had any doubt, we would clarify that doubt. But nowadays, email, this digital technology has, come up, something that we know as electronic mail. We instantly communicate our observations with people sitting elsewhere, and in a jiffy, it reaches them and they respond to us. Or we post on Facebook, we post on any other social WhatsApp. We are connected with the people. And we clarify our doubts. This is how another very important revolution that has taken place is in the field of communication. That's why we say ICT, information communication technology. It has revolutionized everything. It has not only revolutionized data, it has also revolutionized communication. And both these things are, important for us as researchers in humanities. Shakespeare, his plays, earlier, we needed to purchase all of those plays and then read them. Now all his plays, all his sonnets have been archived, so we can access instantly, download all the materials, and then start working on this. So the form has changed, though. We cannot do away with reading. Reading is there. No research in humanities can take place without reading, and in other disciplines also. Well, as a beginner in research, apart from having some print data in the form of books purchased online via Amazon and Flipkart, like online companies, we use the search engines like Google. Once in Google, we type keywords. So we type keywords, but many people think that this typing up keywords on Google, is something simple, something simple. Of course, it is a simple thing, but research suggests is that if a researcher, does not, you might be sometimes typing some keywords. For example, if anybody among you is working on, let's say, Shakespeare, and he types Shakespeare PDFs, okay, he might get some PDF books or PDF of his plays or his sonnets. Well, that's fine, right? So the more you would train yourself to exactly type, on keyboards what you require. There might be many inabilities. Google might not may not exactly give you what you are looking for if you are not familiar with how to type some specific keywords for actually looking for or for getting or retrieving something specific that you require on Shakespeare, right? So this is that's why it has become something. People are researching on it. These ICT people or computer science people, even social science people, they are working on the right use of, correct use of, appropriate use of keywords also. Sometimes you might be wondering why I'm not getting what I actually am looking for on Google. Maybe I too have been thinking about it many a time. Maybe you are not exactly typing what you require. So you have to we have to try to actually train ourselves in the proper use of keywords also on this Google. So we type keywords. Our keywords lead us to the data that we are looking for, right? Sometimes our keywords need to be exact and accurate, and sometimes even a random hit can bring us the data that we are looking for. For example, suppose a scholar working on an area like post-colonial literature, the moment we type this word in Google, an ocean of data would surface in Google in the form of books, research papers, and articles. But we may not require all that. We may require something specific, like post-colonial reading on Indian English novels. Therefore, the keyword has to be something specific so that it brings us something more relevant. Because in research, don't think. We most of us, those who are beginners and those who have spent some 5 to 10 or 15 years, and they are actually dealing with this ICT, dealing with the use of computer, internet, and all these things. We know that this data. For example, post-colonial studies is a wide area, right? It has got its own specific contours, right? And it has got its own local and regional aspects. Now, but once you are in Google, you are in an ocean. It's the keyword, a specific keyword only, that would take us to that very specific contour, to that very specific area, or to that very specific space where exactly our information exists, exactly our information exists. So randomly we might get materials that are related to post-colonial studies as a wide area, as a broader broader area of as far as the subject is concerned. But how to specify it, our mental engagement with our keywords, is very important. And it comes with the experience. The more we use it, the more we are actually engaging ourselves with a subject or with an area, the more familiar we become with it. That's the advantage. And we get so many links. And after being into an ocean, we know exactly the very specific space or the very specific terrain where exactly something is going to helpful for us in the form of data. So that's also a point that we can exactly. I was just thinking about it because I'm not from the field. Therefore, I needed to actually take the help from my own ignorances, and from what I actually have been doing since the day I had a PC, and I started using it for my research, for collection of data, for collection of research materials, and of course allowing myself to be part of this world. So yeah, the point that I'm making is that while searching for data, we have to subject the research data to the process of selection and gradation so that we can read and analyze exactly what we are looking for. So by selection and gradation, as many of our experts might have talked about it in the last 3 or 4 lectures, and Professor Anil Rana Sahib was also talking about one very specific area like the documentation. Fine. So here one very important point is the moment we start research. We start searching something from some area in order to reach to the truth of that very important thing that we are looking for. What's the truth about it? What are the different realities about that thing? So selection. Even before this age of digital technologies, we had to go for the selection and gradation of the data and the material that we would receive from books, magazines, journals, or through our live conversations and interviews with the people. But nowadays it has become a little bit challenging for all the researchers, because the data produced in America, the data produced in other parts of the world, all of it is available. So from technical point of view, all the researchers, whether they are from humanities or they are from social sciences or from natural sciences, what we need to train ourselves is how to select and grade these materials, right? And as we know, and Professor Anil Rana Sahab also talked about it, that primary sources, secondary sources, all of that, we know what's a primary source, what's a secondary source. But why this ICT is challenging for us, and why this digital age challenges us vis-a-vis all these things is because lots of materials. There could be first grade materials, there could be second grade materials. There could be journals that publish trash. There could be journals that follow a proper process of selection, gradation, processing, documentation, verification of truth regarding a subject, regarding any topic, any question that you actually come up with, right? So what all this demands from a humanities scholar and from a social science scholar is that he or she has to train himself or herself in the art of processing the materials, so that he or she can select it, grade it, as we know, and all of us do it. If our research begins with questions, 5 or 6 questions or 1 or 2 questions that we ask about a particular subject or particular information, after having these questions, what's very important is the collection of data. How others have seen these questions, how others have thought about these questions. So when all that material is available on Google or on in journals or in books, whatever. So when we collect it, as I told you, that an ocean of information and data, is brought to you on the screen by this ICT or by these digital technologies. And then what becomes very important, because we are trained in the art of reading, and reading itself is a science. Sometimes you do skimming, sometimes you do scanning, sometimes you read the whole book, and then you look for something specific that is actually needed, that is required for you in the research. So all those things are there, but when this whole ocean of data comes at your doorstep, right, selection and gradation becomes much more important, right? And of course we cannot do away with proper reading of most of the materials that we got, that we printed, or that we downloaded, right? So selection and gradation of materials is very important, so that at the end of the day, when we actually complete our research, we have not we make it sure that we have not accessed irrelevant kind of materials or irrelevant kind of data. So we have to sharpen our skills of selection and selection and gradation. So I'm trying to intermingle, right, what we were doing in our traditional setting of research, and in the challenges that we are facing in the modern age, because data overload and information overload is also a fact that we are grappling with. And also, as this COVID-19 pandemic actually showed us, digital gap is also a fact. There were people who had iPhones, so they could connect themselves with people across the world for lectures, for research, for communication. But there were also people who did not have access to all these gadgets, right? Or they did not have this data connections or internet connectivity or phones and PCs available at their home, right? And with the result, another very important fact, brutal fact that emerged, that surfaced, was digital gap. I mean, there were digital haves and there were digital have-nots. So with the result, so this thing also be, and similarly, data overload is also a fact. Anybody who is connected through these digital technologies, I mean, suffers from data overload. And that is why in research, and particularly in humanities, we are trying to educate ourselves these days about data management, which data to receive and which data to not receive, right? Which data is relevant for me, which data is not relevant for me. This is also a question that is a challenge that we are grappling with these days. And that is why in research, I would particularly focus on that in this age of data overload that these digital technologies have actually thrown to us, selection and gradation. And because the selection and gradation in research would lead us to data management. I mean, we would be, for example, if we begin our research with 5 or 6 questions like what, why, when, how, I mean, how much. I mean, these questions would tell us what is exactly that is relevant for you and what is not relevant for you. So you would go on managing your data. And accordingly, the data that you would receive, the data that you would collect for your research, you would be able to actually analyze it properly, have a conversation or a dialogue, with that data, in order to reach to some conclusions that tomorrow you would say, look, these are the findings, or these are the discoveries that I have made with vis-a-vis a particular subject or a particular area. So in workshops like this on any area of research, one more thing that we can take care of is how to actually know the problems, that we face while actually entering into the field of research. So I was talking about this data overload and its management, and through selection and gradation. That's the point also that we can actually take care of. So this won't be possible until we train our mind and fingers, the art of typing the most relevant keywords while entering the mine of data available on different search engines. So apart from Google like search engines, we can have our data from YouTube also, Facebook also, WhatsApp, Instagram, and host of other websites. That they could be blogging websites also. They could be archives. In digital humanities, archiving is being discussed as one of the most important areas these days. You have archived, for example, Rabindranath Tagore. You have archived Shakespeare. You have archived Mirza Ghalib. Manuscripts. I mean, manuscript is such things that are not published formally by different publication houses. But now, through this process of digitization and digital humanities, you have archived all those materials also. You have archived all those material, and people across the world can access it free of cost. Sometimes, by even through payments also. So these websites, and it is the process of selection and gradation before we start reading and analyzing the data that we have discovered on different digital media. So I would say that data in our time is at your disposal at the lowest possible rates for free, but selection and gradation are to be learned and mastered so that you may land at the right kind of place in the ocean of data. Right. Moreover, the advent of digital methods in the humanities means that scholarly data has a life of its own. Formerly, scholarly data would, in the best case, be available in archives or in printed books, typically alongside the research that it went into. Nowadays, scholars can and should make their data available as independent resources that can be copied, modified, enriched, and redistributed. Right? It is this sharing culture that gives most of the added value to digital methods, for it leads to transparency, reproducibility, and incremental progress in fields where this used to be different. Sharing has become a very important fact on these digital technologies. On Facebook, you share. On WhatsApp, you share, and on other different websites. Through emails, you share your research. Right? Collaboration has, through the sharing culture, actually a researcher can look for collaborations across the world. Earlier it was so difficult. Before this advent of technologies, we needed to write to letters or through phone calls, and then you would you might or might not end up in a collaboration. But nowadays it has become so easy through this culture of sharing. For example, you published a research paper and you share it with researchers working on the same area of research in the UK or in America or in any other part of the world. Right? So this sharing culture, you actually could be facilitated with collaboration. Your idea that you are working in Kashmir or in Jammu or in Chandigarh or in Delhi, right? Instantly you share it, and this is the magic that and it is being noticed by some good journal like Elsevier journal notices it. You have published something from India, Elsevier notes it, Francis and Taylor people notes it, Oxford people notes it. They instantly write to you that we are looking forward, to work with you on this area, right? So this sharing culture that we have nowadays, that nowadays we see emerging as a fact, about research or about our life as a whole, it leads to collaborations across the world. And it can lead to collaborations. So that's why when you share your ideas, right, collaborators from different parts of the world would come and they would say, yes, this is what we were looking for. And together we can make it a better work. We can make it a better work. Earlier, it would not happen on such a mass scale. So actually what I would say that this digital humanities or the intervention of digital technologies in our life, it has liberalized it. This knowledge production, it has liberalized it. This knowledge consumption, it has liberalized. Earlier, it was elitist. It was in a way elitist. Only a handful of people were collaborating or working. But now, through this culture of sharing through these digital media tools and technologies, what we see is that this knowledge production, knowledge consumption, research, I mean, all these things have been liberalized, and the challenge ahead is quality. I mean, as we know, I mean, it has also facilitated third-rate kind of research. Also, I'm sorry, but then the challenge is how to actually train ourselves and let ourselves evolve to a degree of quality knowledge production and quality knowledge consumption, because that is also a challenge, and researchers working on this field could better educate us about that, how to look for quality knowledge production and quality knowledge consumption, because that's why I before a minute or two talked about proper selection and gradation of the kind of data that we receive from this mine, so that and then we also sharpen our skills of analysis, classification is very important in research. Classification of materials is also very important. I mean, suppose materials A, data B, data C, data D, how to classify and then how to read them accordingly, which requires most of your attention and which requires least of your attention. I mean, this is a process, and this that's why departments in different universities and colleges, they organize seminars, they organize workshops, they organize what we call such training workshops, so that researchers can actually know how to do things and why to do things like this or like that. So this was another thing that I was talking about, that sharing, how it leads to collaboration, and how I mean, this is not a unidimensional thing, research. When we know, suppose somebody, generally in humanities, when we enter into research, we think, okay, fine, I got a topic, whether I selected the topic myself or my supervisor selected it for me. I have to collect the material, I have to read the material. Okay, fine. This is how it would end. And one day I would produce a thesis and I would be awarded the PhD. That's generally the notion that all of us, I mean, if not all of us, many of us actually have been through. But basically, what is very important in research is whether we talk about research with reference to digital technologies, or we talk about it with reference to our traditional mode of doing the research through the print materials or libraries that we had earlier, right? What's important is that collaboration, generally, we do not go for collaborations. If not in the formal sense of the word that generally we see in the departments of sciences, scientists across the world sitting together, working together, analyzing a problem, and then publishing it as a kind of joint work. Okay, if not in that sense, at least in this sense, how digital technologies, somebody, for example, at NIT Srinagar, if somebody is working on some specific area of research, right, through the use of this ICT, email, social media, WhatsApp, and other blogging websites, he can start or she can start looking for those people who are working on a similar kind of area or working on similar kind of research questions. I mean, different other parts of the world or different other universities, and he can start corresponding with them. I mean, sharing his insights and actually listening to their insights about these questions. I mean, that is how the mind actually opens up to new possibilities. Because what is research? It's actually we allow our mind, we allow our imagination to open up to new possibilities about a select area, about a particular area, in any field, right? So that is how we can be informally collaborated, and it can become a formal collaboration also vis-a-vis a particular subject. So that's the point that I was trying to make with reference to it. Right. So similarly, when I said that transparency, reproducibility, and incremental progress in fields where this used to be difficult in earlier times, nowadays technology through its intervention, whether it's ICT, digital technologies, digital humanities, Transparency could be, yes, as I talked, copy paste could be a challenge, and yes, of course, plagiarism is a threat also. But simultaneously, it helps us in actually transparency also. For example, if I plagiarize something without actually acknowledging the sources, primary or secondary, I do a kind of stealing of information that has been already produced by somebody else, and I don't acknowledge it. These there are tools, there are technologies that actually help us in locating who is doing what, whether somebody is plagiarizing or not. Professor Anil Rana Saab, before me, he talked about it, how proper documentation can actually help us. But when it comes to technology, it can help us in actually looking for whether a scholar or a researcher has been transparent or not. Transparent in recording the facts, in documenting the facts. There are many tools and many technologies that all of you might be familiar with, right? That, and before we submit a thesis these days, it's mandatory for us to submit it for this plagiarism check, and there are websites that check it. Right? How reliable are they? I don't know about that, but yes, they can ensure us, right, that you have been transparent vis-a-vis the recording and documentation of facts, right? So a scholar, can be aware of it or may not be aware of it, but still, at department levels, we have to ensure that we are making the proper use of these tools, and we are actually awareing our students that look, digital technology, it's a kind of panopticon these days, right? Any wrong step during the documentation process or research process, it can land you into a trouble, because technology has come up with such softwares that actually subject you to surveillance with regards. And this is a good thing. This is a good thing because it has at least ensured that students, scholars, teachers, should maintain this standard of transparency with reference to the documentation of facts and many other areas. Right. So as we know that research is, primarily aimed at knowledge production about a particular field, and it's also about knowledge consumption. So how good a consumer and how good a knowledge producer one becomes during this whole journey, during this whole process, right, during this whole evolution or during this whole training, it depends on the seriousness with which actually a researcher allows himself to enter into a dialogue or a conversation or a communication with the field, right? It's a two-way traffic, but it's in our age, it's not just a two-way, but multi-way. It's many paths, many nodes have to be connected with during this whole process. So that's why this knowledge production is to be seen with the same from the same angle. Right. So apart from these things, it also provides us with opportunities of saving our data, sharing it with others, for creating collaborations with researchers across the world, for discussions and peer group evaluation for the production of better work. One more point that we can help ourselves through these digital tools and technologies is peer group evaluations. I talked about collaboration, but ICT and these digital technologies, for example, before our thesis goes to a supervisor, right, it has made it easy for us that whatever information we produce, we can develop connections throughout the world, connections and networks of those people who are thinking on the same research questions about a similar kind of area, right, in humanities or social sciences, right? And then we share our data, we share our information, our knowledge production with them, they evaluate it. Before it reaches the final stage, we can actually help ourselves in coming up with and we can receive the feedback of those scholars working in, for example, in UK, in America. This is also something that has become, as a as a result of this liberalization of knowledge, production knowledge, consumption, and the intervention of this ICT and these digital technologies, it has also become, I mean, it has made these things very easy for us, very easy for us. And it depends on how seriously we take it and how, I mean, connected we become, and use those different connections for our proper evolution and growth, and for enjoying the better results of this journey of 5 or 2 or 3 or 4 years when we join a department for research on an area. So sorry, I'm sorry. Everything happens in this ocean, but a researcher needs to be sharp. He needs to be creative. He needs to be collaborative. He needs to be open, so that the whole ecosystem. I mean, you have got an ecosystem, multiple ecosystems rather available on this, on these digital, through the help of these digital technologies. So that's why when I earlier talked about selection and gradation, what's important for me, what's not important for me, these multiple ecosystems actually demand that a researcher becomes sharp, focused, smart, vis-a-vis this data overload, information overload, and of course, then he's able or she's able to develop that focus which is required for knowledge production or knowledge consumption in this particular area. That's the point that I was trying to make. So similarly, I when this was something about data, a whole lot of literature is available on it, in different journals in the form of books. You just type the keyword digital humanities, you would get a lot of literature available on it, research papers available on it. So what is data, what is digital humanities, and how these days, I mean, there is an interdisciplinary, rather multidisciplinary approach actually unfolding because of the intervention of these digital technologies and the skills that we actually need to upgrade, update ourselves with, for a better research and for a better communication. So the second thing that I just wanted to share with you or to have a conversation about with you is, every act of research, as on day one, one of our worthy experts, he talked about the importance of thinking. He talked about the importance of communication. He also talked about the importance of, asking critical questions and critical thinking. And then the communication of that critical thinking is also very important. Professor Anil Rana Sahab also talked about, while we are, documenting our research, how communication is also very important. If you have a question in your mind about something, and it's a critical question, you are a critical thinker, but you could not actually communicate it properly. You could not develop that language which actually could have sent across this message to other people. Maybe who could have come up with answers for your questions, or maybe who could have enlightened you about the same, right? Maybe there would be a barrier, that would be a barrier to communication. So that's why language also becomes very important. Critical thinking is also very important. Having a dialogue and having a communication about the questions that you have in your mind about something also becomes important. So generally it is in humanities, we know whether somebody is working in Urdu or Persian or Sanskrit or Hindi or in English. So generally we assume that he or she knows the language of that field. That is okay, that's fine. But then you have to evolve to one more very important step, that is the field that you choose from that discipline. For example, the discipline of postmodern, the area of postmodern studies, or the area of post-colonial studies, post-structuralism, or psychoanalysis, or post-truth. What is the vocabulary of that very particular field? What is the language of that very particular field? A scholar has to familiarize himself or herself with the language of that field. right? So what is it that I'm actually going to talk about, right? So that the people, other people who are ready to collaborate with him or who are ready to listen to him in other parts of the world or share their information with him, they actually understand what his or her questions are about it, right? So because the moment you start using these ICT tools, enter into this data mine, right? The very particular language will start looking at your face. You have to internalize it, you have to understand it, and then properly communicate it. So that's why I would say that, and all of you know it already, that communication, a proper communication for the data that you receive, that you consume, or that you produce, is much more important, because otherwise the importance of your research production would cease to be as you had actually desired it to be, or the questions that you had about it after reviewing a whole lot of data that is already existing about the field. I mean, that would go. It won't have any significance if it is not properly communicated. So, communication of the information is to be learned by a scholar, and particularly when we use this ICT and digital technologies, you need to be very sharp and focused on this. So, as you know, research is aimed at communicating something to your target audience, whosoever your audience would be, whosoever, right? So you have a question, you explore the question, and arrive at some possible results and conclusions. That's what we do in a period of 2, 3, or 4 or 5 years when we join different departments, right? And we start processing our questions with reference to a particular field. So while we are in this process of exploring our research questions, we talk to people, we write to people, and we share our findings with the world. So, what I want to say is that during this whole process, we are actually communicating with our ecosystem that we are in, right? In our age of digital technologies, we communicate through different digital platforms which actually help us in our research. Like email is very important, WhatsApp is, YouTube is there, Facebook is there. So through these different digital platforms, we actually communicate for our research, and for our target researcher, and they augment us in our research for data, search for data, and skills for data processing, right? So for example, generally, many a time there would be debate. Okay, fine. The methods that science people use, natural sciences people use, mathematics people use, statistics departments use. I mean, what do we do in humanities? I mean, you do not follow those techniques. While as the fact is, what they do, we are also doing the same thing. I mean, for example, their data could be different. Their data could be different, but we are also dealing with the data. We are also dealing with the data. They could be classifying the things. They could be analyzing the things. We also do when we, for example, somebody wants to work on Jane Austen or Shakespeare or Chinmay Achebe. I mean, don't we do the similar kind of things? Don't we classify the works? Don't we review the works, right? And don't we then go for the analysis of the data, select data that we receive from those works? I mean, actually, all of us are doing the same thing, but techniques could be different. For example, in mathematics department or in social science department, I mean, for evaluating, something, they might require statistics tools. I mean, it could be equally true for a humanities scholar also, but generally we don't require it. Generally, we don't require it. So, but nevertheless, that doesn't mean that we had not been actually working on some data, classifying that data, analyzing data. We are also analyzing that data. Yes, there could be one difference, that their way of analysis or their way of engagement with that data is uh, quantitative in nature, and ours is qualitative in nature. So we are into, for example, we are into the field of interpretations, process of meaning making, process of, things like this, right? So nevertheless, they also do the same thing after quantifying it. They have to also, show, what are the inferences from this whole lot of data that has been statistically analyzed, right? And for that, they use ICT tools these days. But we also can do that, but generally it's not necessary. Ours is a qualitative field, but that doesn't mean that we are not analyzing the things, we are not classifying the things. We also look for some patterns. Physicists or mathematicians, they look for some patterns, right? We also look for some patterns when we are, dealing with the amount of data that we require for some research. What are the patterns? For example, a novel A, B, or C, or some poetry. If we consciously or unconsciously, we are in search of some patterns, and we find a dominant pattern, for example, with T.S. Eliot, and then we record those dominant patterns, and we say, well, yes, on the basis of these dominant patterns, we can hypothesize that this A, B, C, or D is true about it. But we can keep it hypothetical as long as, some more patterns do not emerge, and they also do not state the same thing. But truth in our case is always, relative. We cannot say that this is 100% true. That goes without saying. So having said this, or keeping that relativity factor about the truth, in our mind, the point that I was trying to make is that the mine of data, or the amount of data that we receive through this digital technologies, different digital technologies these days, right? What we can say that like other disciplines, we also do in humanities and social sciences, classify the things. We also do analyze the things. We interpret the things, right? We also try to actually bring out some patterns from a text that is in front of us, digital in a digital form or not in a digital form, earlier in traditional times. So this is I'm sorry. So we actually communicate. We are all the time, and we are in research. We are all the time in a process of communication. So a researcher in science, humanities, and social sciences cannot think up an effective research without actually using these digital platforms for proper communication. See, for example, how important it becomes these days, this communication. You write a small paper of 10, 15 pages, you submit it to Francis and Taylor, or to Oxford journal, or to some other journal. They have got a panel of reviewers. Those reviewers read your paper, and then they send their recommendations, their suggestions to you. Through these ICT tools, you receive it not only instantly, but you are able to upgrade your research, upgrade your content, through a very smart and fast, rapid kind of communication, right? But by communication, I just do not, you wrote a mail and they wrote a mail. The communication of the problem, the communication of the questions, the communication of the content that you have produced, or the knowledge, right? So again, you would see a reviewer sitting in the USA. He receives a mail from you. You have to express, you have to state the problem, you have to explain the problem, as he actually demands as a reviewer. As a reviewer, so that a proper he must understand you, you must understand him. What is it that he demands as an expert of the field, right? So that communication, ICT and these digital technologies have revolutionized it, made it, and there are many platforms where you can actually edit and do all these things, and you could be in a live communicate with the reviewers and all those panels. So the point, she asks right questions at right time, and then process these questions for arriving at the desired objectives and targets in his or her research. Imagine if the world were without these digital tools in the times of pandemic. It would have been simply horrible if as people would not have been able to communicate with the outside world, our questions would have been muted for some time. But platforms like Zoom, Google Meet, and WebEx, and many other platforms that were created for this communication to be facilitated throughout the world, they enabled us to share our knowledge without any boundaries and restrictions. And our education and research continue to expand through the media of digital technologies as global communications through these networks continue to be. Many research questions could have been just stipulated, but you saw people during this pandemic going for webinars, going for workshops. Even now, at this time when I'm talking to you, right, it's the digital technology that has facilitated this two-way traffic, sharing of ideas with each other, a brainstorming session, we can say. Right, the same thing happened because the world had come to a standstill during the pandemic, but communication continued to be a fact. People published articles, people published in their research in journals, people had webinars, people had many other NARs, through these digital platforms. And what's very important is that communication continued to be a fact, and people collaborated with each other for research on different areas and aspects. And with the result, knowledge production actually did not suffer. Knowledge production and consumption did not come to a halt during this pandemic. So this was something amazing. This was something marvelous, right? Even we continued to teach our students via online mode during the pandemic, and something that we could have. Though it cannot replace the offline mode of teaching, right? But nevertheless, a big gap that could have been left between, right, was actually to some extent actually filled, because thanks to this digital technology. So it's another thing that with this global outreach through digital technologies, digital divide is also a fact that I actually pointed to when I at the very outset. And of course, it continues to be a problem in many parts of the world, including our part of the world, right? So if in future we want to continue, for example, this digital teaching, research, and all these things, fine, we have to simultaneously think about it, how to actually fill the gaps, right? This digital divide that we also. Well, data management. Earlier I pointed out to Nasir Saab. Do we have the time? Yes, Nasir Saab.
You may take a few minutes. We are already out short of time. Anyway, you can continue for a few minutes, and then we shall have the question answer session.
No, I would better with this brainstorming. I would prefer if there is a two-way traffic and we actually start enlightening each other. Because I see there are participants from different parts of the country, and they could have better insights about the field and better experiences. As I at the very outset excused that I'm not the man from the field, right? So
anyway,
I would now
very informative presentation, sir. Anyway, if any participant has any sort of question, please try to ask it right now so that we can make this session kind of interactive one. So
dialogic, because
so
research is a dialogue. Research is a dialogue, and we help each other to improve and fill the gaps. So I would appreciate
any observations from anyone or any questions you may please ask. So anyway, you continue. If there is any question, they will they will write it down here in the chat box, or
they can ask directly. They can ask directly. Fine. Yes, it would be better. Let's use this ICT for a dialogue, for a discussion, and help each other how we can actually further improve our conditions, particularly in humanities discipline.
So I guess none has any questions up till now. You may continue, sir, and try to conclude it.
Okay.
There is a question. Mudassir Amin is asking on what aspects we have to keep sight during research problem selection.
Yeah,
This is what he has written. On what aspects we have to keep sight during research problem selection.
research problem selection. Well, my experience in humanities discipline, right? With reference to that, I would say, I mean, once a research scholar is, has taken the admission at a department, right? He or she should not jump to the selection of the topic. Instead, what he or she should do is he should take 6 months or 1 year or so, right? Uh, while instantly he has, for example, somebody when scholars do come to me, I tell them, I ask them a couple of questions. My first question to them would be, okay, beta, tell me which area are you interested in? Novel? Are you interested in drama? Are you interested in poetry? Or ELT or linguistics, anything like that. So this question that I ask to my researchers helps me in understanding, the area of interest of my student. Find my, for example, scholar A says, sir, I'm interested in research in, for example, novel. Then I ask him or her another question. Okay, tell me in novel, which novel? Whether it is British novel, it's Indian novel, it's African novel, or some other novel. Which area from these multiple areas that we have available in the discipline of humanities? So suppose my scholar says, sir, I'm interested in Indian novel, right? Then I ask him another question, right? Okay, which Indian novel? Which Indian novel? What is the point? This question would try to specify where he or she actually wants to go. Okay, for example, which Indian writers who are available in English or in Urdu or in Hindi or in Sanskrit, whatever, which of them you want to study in English, for example, through translation or through their originals, for example. My scholar says, no, I want to study, such English writers who have reflected or who have written or who have thought about the colonial condition that India actually had to face, right? So this helps us in further specifying the place or the space or the terrain where we are going to go. And then, okay, fine. Is it post-colonial theory or some other theory that you want to actually apply? Which areas of reading, which theories of reading, post-structuralist, post-colonialist, or post-modernist, or anything else? So this is actually how we process, or how we should actually process. So then the student actually, it becomes easier for him or her. Otherwise, a student would land in trouble if things are not actually specified and we do not get to the kind of area which we want to. एक तो ये है कि that I decided it for you. The second is that the student was able to decide it for himself or herself, how to go and how not to go about it. The specificities. Sometimes we know a researcher has been given a topic, but then for 1 or 2 years, he is clueless about it. What to do with it? So that is why you allow a student, you allow a researcher, okay, fine, take 1 year. First 1 year, once you are into the department, take first 1 year, read the books, primary, secondary, whatever is available on this very particular specific, area where you want to go to. Read the material. Okay, let him go into the ocean of data that is available into that very specific area. So once he is into that ocean for 1 year, for 1 year's period, ask him anything that you read or write. Just review it. Try to review it. Try to understand it. Try to analyze it. So that finally, after 1 year, he or she would come up. I believe he would come up with some good research questions. And then finally, with a synopsis, stating those research questions, and finally, the whole process, the whole journey that he or she is going to undertake about it. So that's how, I would ideally suggest this is how we can go and how we can help our students in actually specifying some problem that he or she wants to deal with.
Thank you so much, sir. We had only one question, I guess. No one else has raised any question or query. Anyway, this was a very informative session and wonderful kind of talk by you, sir. Now, since we're already running out of time, this hall is booked for some other, uh, I mean, function here as well. So anyway, I express my gratitude and thanks to you, sir. You have been very cooperative and in touch always, and you have been there with us, and you have spared your precious time to deliver your precious lecture with us. Now I request Shaista Sadiq to deliver a formal vote of thanks. We have many questions now. Of late, we're already late anyway. Under which
So if you have
subheading?
time, if Nasir Sahab, you have time, I can. No problem.
You can briefly answer Mursalin Jahan's question. She's asking under which subheadings a synopsis is to be written.
I mean, this question, I mean, different departments have different, generally we give a brief introduction, some review of the existing body of literature that's available on the subject. Okay, research questions, we give, a tentative chapter scheme, right? And then, of course, some bibliography. But different departments can have different, these ways to do it. Generally, we do it like this in English. At our department, we do it like this. So it's a minimum, but statement of the problem, research objectives, that's very important. And it also demands when you actually come up with a synopsis, you must have already read about the kind of materials that are already available, on the subject. And in the light of those reviews, you must be able to find the gaps that exist in those reviews, in those materials, and so that you can process it for answering some new questions on the same area. This is how we can. Your department can have a set format for that and training also for that, but that's how we go about it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Now, Ms. Shaista, you may please continue with your formal vote of thanks. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Department of Humanities, Social Sciences and Management and organizing team, I would like to thank first and foremost wonderful speakers, Professor Anil and Professor Amin Pare. Thank you for lending your time, sir. Our special thanks goes to HOD, faculty members, research scholars, and organizing team. And last but not least, a wonderful audience. In this workshop, over the course of time of new days, we will gain more insights from the distinguished speakers. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you, sir. So we shall call it a day. Thank you all. I will see you again tomorrow in the next session. Till now, bye-bye. Thank you.